Day 11. I forgot to play the little video, but oh well. And today we're going to talk about the kickoff for part two. So, part two is mapping all of the ocean industry as best we can, in 20 days. It's a big thing to ask for because there's actually a lot going on in the ocean industries. But what I have done, and let me see if I can share this with you, is start to create kind of a graphical map of the ocean industries. And there's two ways that I'm looking at this. Before I talk to all of the different people that I have lined up for interviews to talk about their part in the industry and where they see difficulties and where they overlap. So we'll kind of build this together, is to talk about things that are happening on shore and in transport hubs, things that are happening in inland waterways and kind of intermodal short sea, and then coastal, which is short sea, and aquaculture, as well as other production that's happening at sea, and then deep sea, which is primarily transport, but can also be research and other things. And what I'd like to do is end up with a map of the different difficulties and also interdependencies of the different parts of the ocean space. And then after part one, we'll do part three, which is the impact on the world that the ocean industries have. And then part four is all about the people and the stakeholders within the industry. And I think that that's going to be really interesting as well as really complex. The second way to look at this is to kind of group things together. And I have a really loose Venn diagram here for how I think of players in the ocean industry. But of course, this is just the first version and will probably change quite a lot. We have kind of a grouping of governance and regulators and those kind of things that are making sure that we're following guidelines and recommendations and laws. So from the regulatory standpoint, you have national regulatory bodies and international regulatory bodies that impact the operations that you can do on the ocean space. And then you have somewhere between the professional services and regulators, these kind of industry bodies where they make recommendations, and they're actually groups of owners that are kind of creating recommendations to make safer industries. Then you have kind of classification societies that are checking up on both for the owners as they work for the owners, as well as providing professional services and in some ways some governance. So that becomes kind of interesting, and I hope to talk to some people from classification societies also, I think on Tuesday, to look at their perspectives in this. And then there's the professional services, so chartering and brokerage and hull clubs and admiralty law firms and vetting firms and those kind of things, where they're serving the owners and operators of assets, as well as making sure that there's compliance with this kind of governance and regulators. And then the operations and assets, I'm kind of grouping them into big groups. So you have the producers in the ocean space, like energy and aquaculture and fishing and mining. And then you have transporters in the ocean space, tankers, container ships, ro-ro, break bulk, barges, and all of those things, and bulk, of course. Then there's construction in the ocean space, so dredges, heavy lifts, those kind of things. And then you have kind of expedition stuff which is research and surveys and exploration. There are not so many of those vessels compared to the other groups, but they're a group that's important in the ocean space because so much is unknown about the ocean. And the ocean seabed can change depending on the area. So it's important to make sure that surveys are done and are valid. And then there's naval, which is kind of another big part of the industry. So destroyers, aircraft carriers, patrol boats, all of these military operations that are happening in the ocean space by many, many countries. And then there's another category that I made, which is pleasure and passenger vessels. So that's kind of how I'm thinking of approaching this. Maybe you would approach it differently. I don't know. Find out. So please kind of comment if you're thinking about it in a similar way or if you're thinking about it in a different way than this. If you think there's other overlaps here, which I'm sure there are, but this is kind of the loose approximate groupings to start off with as we kind of go into this big conversation. But I hope that between these two kind of maps, we can kind of make a hybrid model of the ocean space that we can use to think about later on the stakeholders and the needs to take into the consideration for the design of the ocean space going forward and how these many, many operators will or can work together to have a smooth, safe, sustainable, and inclusive ocean industry, which is kind of my small goal in this 100-day project, which I know it's really ambitious, but that's okay. If we fail, at least we tried, right? So this is what I had for day 11. Please comment, follow, share. Let me know what you're thinking about it. Recommend people who I should talk to as well. So I have a list going, but I'm trying to kind of build the bigger picture all together. Yeah, that's it. Day 11. We're going. Talk soon.